Hey there, welcome back. So today what I'm just going to do is explain some of the things I've been doing over Christmas on my break, things about the Spectrum Next that I want to make videos on, and a little bit about this random game development idea that I've got. So here we go. So in my previous video, what I said I was going to do is make a game, but I didn't know how. Little video up here if you want to go watch that. And to help me with that, I've decided to install GameMaker and have a play with that. I'm also using that at work. There's a little game sort of making unit that we do with the kids where they get to learn how to make a game. And it kind of helps if I know how to use the tools that they'll be using. Now the nice thing with GameMaker, especially the drag and drop interface, is that I can't get distracted by the coding. That's my main problem I've got whenever I try and make a game. I just get lost in the weeds of like the collision detection system and all the different options. I had to play with GameMaker for a bit. I managed to make a fairly simple game in an afternoon watching a few YouTube videos. So I'm going to carry on with that. It should help me stick to making a game idea and trying things out instead of getting lost, rather than wanting to write lots of code. Because if I just start coding on my Next, we're off into the weeds like I'm going to talk about in a minute. So with my Next, I've been trying to learn more about it, which is a total opposite of what I've just been saying. I do want to get lost in the weeds with my Next. I want to properly understand it. I've never owned a computer that I really understand. I've always just like copy and pasted stuff and fumbled around a bit and made it work, but never had any deep understanding. So that's kind of where I'm going with this, and as I learn this stuff, I'll make videos and share them with you so you can have a look as well. But what I tried doing was a fairly simple thing of wanting to print text on the screen. I remember watching demos and things where there's like this nice full colour text that you could see sort of go across the screen in different patterns and things. Oh, by the way, I've got this nice green bit here that I can do stuff to. So what I wanted to do is print some text. So I've seen demos and things where there's like nice writing on the screen, and it's a game that I'm ultimately trying to make, or several, and they need to have nice looking text. So the built-in Spectrum printing is not really going to cut it. So I went down a bit of a rabbit hole trying to print text on the screen. It all started with me trying to just display an image. I figured I'd need a title screen of some sort. So I worked out how to draw one, or copy and paste bits of other images, because my art skills are not that great. And then I needed to get it into the Next. So I used the same image conversion utility that I used for the sprites. And I managed with a bit of sort of effort and fuss to get a nice full screen image onto the screen. However, it was really slow, so I had to figure out how to use DMA to copy that really quickly. And that was quite nice. I now understand a bit more about how the DMA works. So with a bit more playing around, I'll be able to make a little video on that in the future. So I needed to load the images off an SD card, rather than embedding it as C code with a header like you sometimes do. Because these images are like 48K in size, you can't really go slapping 48K of data inside a header file and hoping the compiler knows what to do with it. You're going to fill up your RAM. Which is also where I had to learn about memory banking, which I looked at a bit with the layer 2 stuff, but I never really went any deeper than enabling it and switching in and out the different bits of the screen. So I had to play around with that and worked out how to load an image in parts into different banks in the Next RAM, because the Next has got quite a lot of memory. And I had to figure out where I could put it. And it turns out that you can pretty much put it anywhere, as long as you're not overwriting yourself. It's like completely your machine to play with, which is a complete novelty compared to like a PC or something. But then I needed to print fonts. It's one thing just slapping an image on the screen using a DMA routine, but to print a font, you need to first find an image, and it just turns out these are bitmap pictures. I had a scan around the internet, I found some nice websites with the like old demo scene fonts. So what I did was I took one of these, ran it through my image conversion utility, loaded it into RAM, and then hit a big problem that it was using about 16K of RAM just for the font image, like nothing else. And that's no good. I can't have like quarter of the Spectrum's memory space just devoted to pictures of text characters that I'm going to put on the screen. I needed to come up with a slightly better way of doing this. Now, while trying to work all this stuff out, I found that the image conversion utility I was using didn't really work well with these kinds of images. So what I had to do was write my own, and that led me down this horrific path of trying to understand how the Windows bitmap file works. I picked BMPs because they're not compressed, and in my head it was just bitmap, you know, it's in the name. But it turns out there's weird padding that goes on at the end of like rows and things. And the image is upside down. And there's lots of extra stuff that you just don't need to know if all you're trying to do is put some pictures on a computer. So I then found this header-based library that you can include that does all that for me. That just gives me a simple array of bytes that I can then go through and work with. Another thing I found was that while a full colour font looks really nice on the screen, I can't really do that on this machine. I need to simplify it. So I went for a 1 bit per pixel font. And trying to create those is difficult because it turns out that not many modern art packages will let you save in 1 bit per pixel monochrome images. And about the only format that supports that is Windows bitmap. Now, I did discover that Windows Paint can do this, but when your development kit involves Windows Paint, then you know you're probably doing something a little bit wrong, and you need to think of a better way of doing this. So I don't really want to have to use some sort of image editor to create or modify a font I've found, and then run it through Windows Paint just to get a bitmap that's 1 bit per pixel. Now fortunately, the image conversion library that I found will load in just random pictures of any format, and will convert them internally for you. So I can use that. I can now just get a font off the internet that's whatever, convert it into black and white, so still 8 or 16 bit per pixel, load it into my utility with this library, and just ask it to give me like the red channel or the green channel or something and work with that. And then I can go through all the bits and pick out all the white pixels and all the black pixels and turn that into my own 1 bit per pixel file format. Now this worked quite well, and I've now got a little file format of my own font that I can load in, and I can print it using printf, which I wrote a little version of, so it can print text and numbers. It can even do individually coloured text, and each letter can be a different colour, so that's quite nice. One of the reasons I'm doing this is not just to print out like the high score on the bottom of a screen or something, but I need some debugging utilities. At the moment my debugging consists of flashing the border different colours depending on what's going on with the code, and if that doesn't work I'm just kind of looking and guessing and commenting code out until I find out where it stopped working. So I would at least like to print things on the screen, especially if I'm starting to do like game things where you can't really pause and step through lists of items to work out what's going on. It's nice to have like the player's coordinates printed on the screen so you can check what's happening to the game. So this print utility will get used quite a lot. I don't think it's the most efficient use of code. There's quite a lot of nested loops inside it. So maybe I'll have to refactor this and not make it a printf that can do everything, but just have specific print routines as I go along. But this is stuff to work out in the future. So another thing I had to play with was the copper, which is the coprocessor in the Next. It's a really simple state machine that has about 4 commands in it. There's no looping, there's no branching, there's no setting of variables inside code. It just sequences through a list of instructions. And by itself it seems kind of pointless, like it doesn't appear to do much. But then when you start to look at it combined with other things, you can get some quite interesting effects out of the machine. So the traditional one that everyone on the Amiga used to do was have coloured bars across the screen. So I figured I'd try and do that. And that was quite an interesting little diversion for a couple of hours, as I worked out how to draw pixels on the screen without actually drawing them on the screen. You see, the stripy background in the border is actually just the border colour being changed on certain scan lines. It's not drawing pixels. But actually I'm not even changing the border colour. I'm more just changing the palette entry for what the border is set to. Now, I want to make that move up and down in a sort of fancy pattern, and I'm fairly sure you can do more with it and like reprogram the thing whilst it's running. So I need to have a play around with that a bit more. So this year I want to have a bit more of a plan. Last year I was just kind of doing stuff and turning the camera on when I thought I had something interesting to tell everyone. I'm going to make it a bit more organised. I've realised that some of this stuff is better done as written content, so what I've been doing over Christmas as well is tidying up my websites that I've got. I've kind of redone the interface. I had to play with CSS and a bit of JavaScript and HTML, which is awful. I'm never going to be a web developer. I just don't like the stuff. But I've managed to bodge out some semi-decent websites. So I'll be putting like relevant written content on there. I'll also remember to put code on my GitHub. I've noticed a few people have left comments asking for code and whether it's available. And it is. I have my own internal repository where I put things. I just need to remember to copy it onto my actual GitHub repo when I've finished it. So what I'll be doing is using GameMaker to prototype some games. I might switch to something else when I get bored of it, I don't know. It might be the thing that lets me get an idea out of my head pretty quickly. I want to continue getting lost inside the inner workings of the Next and try and make a game with it, or several games, or whatever. We'll see where we get to. And then I've still got a broken GameCube that needs fixing, and my Atari ST, I've got some sort of hard drive kit that I want to build. And I also got this rather interesting book that I'm going to read, so I can try and learn a bit more about electronics. At the moment, I kind of get the basics, but a lot of what I've been doing is just kind of reading something and copying it and hoping for the best, and hoping I've not blown anything up whilst I've been fixing it. And so far it's worked all right, but my deduction skills of what's going wrong are not as good. So if I actually had a broken machine, I wouldn't really know how to fix it. So I want to kind of learn some more about that. So if this is the kind of stuff you're interested in, do the YouTube thing with the buttons at the bottom, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.